Hey, it's Mark Ferguson with InvestorMore, and I'm outside a commercial property I bought a few years ago, and we had someone trying to scam us hard on this property. So we'll talk about what happened, how we avoided it, and how you can avoid scams in real estate as well. There's a lot of scams going out there, and this was a new one that I'd never heard of or seen before, and it almost sounded legit until the end. So we'll talk about what happened, we'll give a little update on this property, and talk about how to avoid scams as well. All right, so this property I bought, I said a few years ago, it was probably 2019. With a 1031 exchange, I actually sold my first rental property I ever bought, did a 1031 exchange, put that money into this property. I paid $590 for it, I think, or was it $510? Hold on a second here. So yeah, it was $590, and this is a 10,000 square foot building. It was for sale for a long time. I think it was worth way more than that when I bought it. One of the reasons it was so cheap is because it's got a tenant in there, a fence company, and they had extremely low rent. So part of the things we did when we bought the building was increase rent a little bit. I don't even think we went up to full market rent or close to it, but we increased it some to make it, make a little bit of money. And then they were using all of the building. They didn't need all the building, so we shrunk them to about half the building, and we tried to rent half that building for a long time. So that went slow, but we do have some of it rented now. We'll talk about that. And then the fence company who rents it now actually kind of brought this scam to our attention, but they didn't realize it was a scam. So what happened was the electric company, which is Xcel for this building, and you may remember we had issues with Xcel last year, was it 2 years ago, where they turned off power to our 8-plex and wouldn't turn it back on when it was freezing out. And that's actually against the law, but they claimed it was a commercial property because there was a commercial boiler on a meter that we had never paid, never knew even existed. And eventually someone turned it on for us that weekend, I think because of the videos I posted and maybe some of the people talking about those videos. So we got it back on, got it paid and fixed, but that was a very weird situation. I'll try to remember to link to that video if I can. But I had the call into Xcel trying to explain to them that there are people in the apartments with no heat, and it was like 10 degrees outside, and they weren't buying it. They were not going to turn that power back on for any reason. So with this situation, and that bathroom looks way better now, by the way. This is the original video when I first bought it. I don't have a new video. I try not to disturb the fence company too much. But the fence company called us and said they had a shutoff notice posted for the electricity. And we're like, oh, great. So I think it was a Friday. My bookkeeper doesn't work on Fridays. We're scrambling around trying to figure out what's going on. They're like, yep, we're going to shut off power this afternoon if you don't pay what's owed. And I'm like, this makes no sense. We pay our bills. This shouldn't happen. But like I said, there's been weird stuff that's happened before with Xcel and other utility companies where it's like we buy a property, we've been paying utilities, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's another meter that you weren't paying that the tile company never knew about, the other, the sellers didn't tell us about, and it hasn't been paid for months. Sometimes we've had it where like it wasn't paid for years, and all of a sudden they said, oh, we should try and just shut off their power because this hasn't been paid, and we may or may not give any warning on that. So given our history with this company, it wasn't as crazy as it sounds for this to happen. So we're scrambling around trying to figure out what's going on and talking to who we thought was the electric company, and they're like, yep, you owe $1,700. We logged on to our accounts. They all showed paid. There was no balance owed. Again, normally I'd be like, oh, this is a scam. There's no reason to believe that. But like I said, there's been issues before where there's been weird meters that haven't been accounted for, haven't been paid, and we've had power shut off in the past on a whim without much warning. And so basically what they wanted to happen was they wanted us to pay $1,700 or they were going to shut it off that afternoon. And then they're like, well, it's a commercial property, and since it's commercial, it might be 7 to 10 days before we can get it shut back on again because that's just how long it takes. And so they had really built in this idea of needing to get it switched on right away, needing to pay it today, or else this business could be shut down for a week, which is not good for the tenant, not good for me. Creates a lot of situations that, are bad all around. And when you have this sense of urgency, sometimes your brain doesn't always think all the way, and you don't consider all the different possibilities. So we're thinking about this. We're like, okay, let's just pay it. We'll get this figured out. We'll get it sorted later. We'll get a refund from the electric company when they see that, hey, we have been paying it, or if there's a weird meter that hasn't been paid for this long, we'll figure it out. Well, when we got to that point, they're like, okay, you need to go to Walmart and pay in cash or with a debit card, because that's where our payment processor is. And if anybody ever tells you that, that's when the red lights start flashing. Ding, 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 ding. Don't do this. Do not pay anyone. Stop what you're doing, because that is the surefire sign of a scam, right? I've had, people pretend to be me emailing them. They find, my email address from my office or something like that. They imitate my email address, even though it's not for me, and say, oh my gosh, I'm stranded in Europe, or, oh, I forgot my wallet. Can you go to Walmart and send me some money, through Walmart's payment processing? I don't even know how it works. I've never done it. But if you see those, it's a scam, right? And I've had people, send me messages and emails like, oh, are you okay? I'm like, nope, that's a scam, not me. So when that popped up, we knew something was going on, something was wrong. And then I'm like, okay, call back Excel. I had, John, my assistant, working on this, and our office kind of transaction coordinator. I was like, what number are you calling? Are you calling back the Excel number or this other number that was given to us? And he's like, I've just been calling back the number that was given to us. So I'm like, okay, we've got to call Excel directly. If something sounds weird, like a scam, like something isn't right, call the company directly. Don't call back the number they're calling you. Hang up, call them back directly from the online number is correct. And that's a really good way to figure out if it's a scam or not. So once we did that, it's like, oh, yep, you're paid up. There's nothing's getting shut off. No worries there. And then we called the fence company too, because I'm like, did they really post a shut-off notice? And I'm like, hey, did they post something? He's like, no, they called me. I'm like, oh. But I think he told us that they posted something about being shut off, because they almost always post something, and he didn't tell us they'd called, which made much more sense than them posting something. Because if they post something, there's a good chance there's cameras, you might catch someone, and it's very rare that these scams are local people. They're usually out of state, out of the country, and once you send them money, they can disappear, never to be found again. And if they ask you to pay for cash or debit card at Walmart, that's obviously the number one sign it's a scam. If they don't do anything local, if it's all over phone calls, if they ask you to send money out of the country, that's a scam. Be very careful with all those. So what are some other scams we've seen lately? Well, my wife actually just called me today and said someone from the sheriff's office called her because she missed jury duty. I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, it didn't sound right. She called back the sheriff's department directly. They said, it's a scam. It's going around. She didn't even stay on the phone long enough to see what they wanted, if they want you to pay a fine or something like that. But that was a scam. We had another scam on one of our properties that was for sale, where I got a bill in the mail for tree removal. I've never used this company, never seen this company. And I'm like, what is this? And we called them, and they said someone had called them to get a bid to cut down the trees, and they had wanted them to cut down the trees, and then they would pay them $5,000, and they needed to refund the extra back to them. And it was obviously a scam once you heard what was going on, but the tree company had thought it was legit and real and sent us a bid to do this. And luckily they sent it to us, and they didn't perform this work and then try and get paid in this weird way, because they wouldn't have gotten paid, or something would have been bad check, something. Not sure how all those work, but if it sounds weird, if it sounds like it could be a scam, make sure you check it out and don't just blindly do it. Some other scams, of course, there's rental scams. We haven't seen any of those for a while, but when we put properties up for rent, a lot of times we'd have people, or even properties for sale too. Actually, it's more often properties for sale. we'd have people put those properties up for rent on Craigslist and say, hey, you know, if it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, we're trying to sell for, you know, $400,000. They put it up for rent at like $500 a month, something absolutely ridiculous. It would never be rented that low. And they get people to call in. They're like, yeah, it's yours. Just send us the deposit to this address. And it's usually out of the country. Like, that's another one, massive sign it's a scam. And then once you send a deposit, you never get keys. You never see the property. It's done. So we've had a number of people who have called us because they saw our sign in the yard. And they're like, well, we were driving by this property for rent. And we saw a for sale sign. We're trying to figure out what it is. And we'd explain to them it's a scam. Find it, report it on Craigslist, things like that. But there's a lot of ways out there people get scammed. Of course, one of the ways that is absolutely horrible is wire fraud, where if you're buying a house, if you're, you know, sending money to the title company, a lot of times people will try and intercept those emails, do phony emails, give you the wrong wiring information, and have you send massive wires out of the country, and you can't always get those back. And so if you're closing on a property, if you're sending big wires, always call the title company, confirm the wiring instructions, make sure they're from them. If they're weird emails, if they seem strange, always confirm it with the title company. I get lots of emails from random title companies in other states that are scam, phishing for information or something. I just delete those. Lots of weird stuff out there, so be careful. Now, with this property, I promised I'd talk about it a little bit. It does look a lot better now than it did before. We've done some work on it, fixed some stuff. We fixed some of the roof stuff, cleaned up some of the issues. Part of the vacant space, the left side there, has been vacant for a while. I had some cars in there for a while and different stuff, but it's been hard to rent because there's not an awesome bathroom. It's not the prettiest, but we didn't want to spend a lot of money on it until we found a tenant. So we had actually a neighbor, a commercial property, ask about storing stuff in there, and it's been used for storage for a little while now. So it isn't a ton of money. It isn't as much rent as, say, if we were to fix up the spot and add a bathroom and all kinds of other stuff and go through that process. But it's a decent amount of money for that side of the building, and it makes the building pretty profitable right now. So when I first bought it, you know, it made a little bit of money with just half of it occupied. And now it makes a decent amount of money with most of it occupied, even though the rent isn't as high as it really could be. And something else, that the lease did expire for the fence company. We gave them the option to renew it at a little higher price. And again, still below market rents. If you wanted to try and find another property like this and rent it with some of the space he has, which he's supposed to have shrunken down and hasn't done yet, and the location on one of the busiest corners in this town, you'd be paying way more. And he's always talked about moving and finding a new place, and he hasn't because he can't find it anywhere as cheap as this place is now. But he did not want to pay more, so we just left it as a month-to-month lease, which, if I ever decide to sell the property, if I ever find a tenant, you know, who wants the whole building, leaves me a lot more flexibility. He's talked about retiring, selling the business, different things. So we'll see what happens. I think he's probably going to stay for a long time unless we decide to do something on our side. But having it month to month is actually better for us. We don't make quite as much money as if he'd signed a long-term lease for a little bit more. But if someone wants to buy it, lease it, then if they wanted to, you know, they could give him notice and he'd have to leave at some point. So that's the property. Those are the scams. It is kind of a neat area, a neat building. It used to be a car dealership, we believe, at one point. Like I said, it's a fence company. Before that, they sold magnets, I guess. And it's been lots of different things. And yeah, we'll keep chugging away with this one. Hopefully there's no more scams. Hopefully they don't fall for any scams. Luckily, that hasn't happened yet. And hopefully no one else out there has fallen for them. And hopefully this will help you in the future if you get one of these scams or weird situations with your business or personal life as well. All right, let me know what you think, and we'll be back with many more videos.